Guten Abend.
Good evening.
Und herzlich willkommen
Welcome
in der Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung.
here at Heinrich-Böll
Mein Name ist Imme
Foundation.
Scholz.
My name is Imme Scholz. Since April
eine der
2022,
zwei Vorstände der
I've been one of the
Stiftung und
two
ich vertrete heute
chairpersons
Abend
of our
meinen
board,
Kollegen
and
Jan
tonight I'm stepping in
Albrecht,
for my
der
colleague
leider
Jan Albrecht, who cannot attend, unfortunately, because he's sick.
zu unserer heutigen Veranstaltung.
I'd like to welcome you to today's event, Democratic Israeli Civil Society, 1 year
2023.
after October 7th, 2023. We host this event together with the New Israel Fund here in Germany, and it's been a great collaboration as always. Over a year ago, on 7 October 2023, Hamas and other Islamist groups from Gaza carried out an unprecedented attack on Israel in which more than 1,200 people were murdered and over 200 were taken hostage. This was and keeps being a traumatic experience for the whole of Israeli society. Never before, since the founding of the State of Israel, have so many Israelis been killed, injured, and kidnapped in one single day. That's why 7th October 2023 continues to shape the everyday lives of people in Israel today, 1 year later. We have some of these people here with us in Berlin today, including some who themselves lost family members on 7th October. My condolences and sympathy go out to them and to all other Israelis. But it wasn't just Israel that went through difficult times last year. The war in Gaza Strip against Hamas has cost the lives of over 40,000 Palestinians, and the Israeli army has completely destroyed large parts of the Gaza Strip. The humanitarian situation is disastrous, especially in the north, and the future of Gaza Strip is completely uncertain. Settlers' violence has been increasing, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And also in Lebanon, since September, there's been an open, fully-fledged war between Hezbollah and Israel, and civilians are suffering as a result. Here, too, I sympathize with the suffering of Palestinians and Lebanese people, and my condolences go out to them, too. And that precisely is one of the most important messages for me in these difficult times. The pain on the one side does not belittle the pain on the other side in any way, and it doesn't justify it. Empathy for all victims of war and violence is the core of our humanity, and it should also guide our politics. I'm sincerely sorry that you're only starting to listen to the translation just now. I'm sorry, I can't start from scratch now. But I would like to repeat this last paragraph. So the pain on the one side, on the Israeli side, does not belittle the pain on the other side, and it doesn't justify it. This goes both ways. Empathy for all victims of war and violence is the core of our humanity, and it should also guide our politics. So this capacity for empathy and solidarity, as well as the courage to uphold the values of democracy and human rights, even in difficult times, that's what unites our guests from Israel today. They are all involved in Israeli civil society. Over the past year, they have provided the Israeli internally displaced persons in the south and north with the most basic necessities. They offer them psychological care for traumatized people, and they provide significant support to the relatives of the hostages. And it is also them who advocate for Jewish and Palestinian citizens to live together as equals. It's them who publicly show empathy for Palestinians in Gaza, and it's them who continue to call for a just peace solution for the Middle East. So it's your work that commands my utmost respect. You represent the diverse, multifaceted, and democratic Israel that we want to protect and defend. It is often civil society groups which protested for months before 7th October 2023 against the so-called judicial reform of Benjamin Netanyahu's government. And in many cases, it's been the same activists who now, in the course of the war, are suffering from the restrictions of their freedom of expression and assembly in Israel. I am delighted to see that we have been able to gather so many Jewish and Palestinian activists and experts from civil society. Together, we want to discuss what democratic civil society in Israel is doing and how it works in a society marked by trauma, fear, confusion, and polarization. Of course, we will also be talking about the enormous challenges it is facing. So my thanks goes not just to our panel members, but also to our long-standing partners from the New Israel Fund. With its financing of civil society organizations in Israel, the New Israel Fund makes a significant contribution to ensuring that smaller, democratic, and above all, government-critical civil society structures can continue to work in Israel. It was only thanks to the expertise and the network of the New Israel Fund that we were able to put together today's panel. Many thanks go to Jörn Böhme, Maya Soirev, and Amir Teilhaber from NIF Germany. Now, despite the somewhat heavy topic, I would now like to wish you a fruitful and stimulating evening of discussion, and I hand over the microphone to the moderator of today's event, Christian Meyer. Christian Meyer is the Middle East correspondent for the FAZ newspaper, and he's been working in Tel Aviv since 2021. As a journalist, he's gained years of experience in Germany and in the Middle East. In 1999, together with fellow students, he founded the Middle East magazine Zenith, of which he later became the editor-in-chief. Thank you very much. I hand it over to Christian Meyer.
Thank you, Ms. Scholz, for the introduction. Good evening and a warm welcome also from my side to everybody in the audience and online. I'm very glad to be in Berlin tonight, and I'm happy to see that apparently some other people are thinking that nothing exciting is happening in world politics this day. So why not come to this event? But actually, maybe we should enjoy the calm before the storm is coming. But we have, as you already said, a timely and important topic, which is Israeli civil society 1 year after October 7. And it's a topic that I think doesn't always get the attention it deserves outside of Israel. So I'm very happy that the NIF and the Heinrich-Böll Foundation had the idea to come up with this evening. Civil society in Israel has taken a severe blow on October 7th, as everybody else in the country. At the same time, it has risen admirably to the challenge. Numerous grassroots groups have sprung up, and existing organizations have broadened their activities to help the fellow countrymen to get through this crisis. At the same time, the challenges of Israeli civil society are increasing. The circumstances under which they are working are getting more and more difficult. That's something we're going to talk about tonight, the challenges and the prospects of Israeli civil society. Actually, I cannot stress enough how critical and important the work of the civil society in Israel is. I should maybe at this point say the democratic and liberal civil society, because there is also another strand of non-governmental activity in Israel, which is, though far less democratic, far less liberal, but very well funded and with a lot of political backing in these days. The influence of this part of non-governmental activity is also felt abroad, even in German politics, and that's not just rumors, even if some people are claiming so. It's all the more important that we are listening to the voices of those who genuinely are advocating for a democratic, liberal, and equal society. And I'm very happy that the NIF has assembled tonight 6 outstanding activists and representatives of different NGOs. We are going to have a panel discussion with 4 of them. And after that, there will be time for questions from the audience. But first, we're going to hear 2 keynote speeches, and it's my pleasure to introduce now the first of our keynote speakers, which is Shira Ben-Sasson Fürstenberg. Shira is from the New Israel Fund Israel. She's an associate director there and is the head of the International Relations and Development Department. She has an MA in anthropology from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and a rich background in working with and for women's rights, especially within Judaism. Shira is also the co-founder of a new initiative which is called Leftists of Faith, and which aims to bring together Jewish Israelis of different political backgrounds who are committed to democracy, pluralism, and equality. Thanks for coming, and please, Shira.
Good evening, Shalom. It's good to get away from Israel for a little bit and to breathe different air. Berlin air has been very crisp and clean, at least for me, in the past few days, so thank you for having me. In my years of working in social change in Israel, I've always been told that a crisis is an opportunity, that crisis is an opportunity. Some of our friends on the staff call it the crisis unity, and that you can use a crisis in order to grow. In Hebrew, the word crisis, mashber, is the word for the place where a woman gives birth. It's those, I don't know the name in English or in German, but it's those stones that the women in ancient times used to sit on in order to give birth. So the mashber is the crisis, is the place for birth. And the other thing I know about crisis is that it's also a catalyst. It really puts social processes and issues that we've been dealing with into fast forward, into fifth gear, into a very speeded and deepened and heightened circumstances. A few years ago, the New Israel Fund staff had a training with a fundraising expert from Boston, from the United States. Someone who was a veteran fundraiser in the Jewish community and was raising much more money than over the years that we have ever had raised, and came to teach us the strategies and the know-how of the work. And she told us, and this has been at least, I don't know, 5 or 7 years ago, it stayed with me because it was so meaningful. She said, when you talk to your donor community and to your supporters community, you're only allowed to use the framing, the idea, the setting of a crisis once a decade. Once every 10 years, you can go to your donor community and say, now is a time that we are feeling deep crisis, severe crisis. Can you be with us? Can you help as you always do? Can you help more than you always do? That was shocking to me at the time. I thought it was funny and ridiculous. And maybe it's Israeli chutzpah to say, you know, she came to teach us, but what does she know about our circumstances? But it just didn't seem real. That when you're working in social change, you can come from a perspective of a deep crisis or some level of crisis in your community to your supporting circles once every 10 years. And all of the rest of the time, business as usual, easygoing, we're doing our ongoing work. That was before a series of crises that hit Israel, and some of them even hit the international communities and humans at large. After she said that, in the years that came after, we had to deal and think about social change in Israel and Israel's most underprivileged communities, the most vulnerable communities in Israel, through COVID, through a year with 5 national elections campaigns, through the judicial overhaul and the attempts of the Netanyahu government to change our legal system and the rule of law, and through a war. And I would like to find that person and call her back and say, in your dreams, can you live in a reality where everything you talk about and the way you shape your actual everyday work and the way you shape your conversation with your supporters is a crisis once a decade? We live in a reality when we go to sleep at night and we consider what to wear because you know you'll be meeting your neighbors in the middle of the night when the siren is sounded. So you plan your pajamas accordingly. I live in a reality where we lost a community member, a neighbor, a beloved boy who grew up in my synagogue, Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, who lives on my street, and I'm friends with his beautiful parents, Rachel and John, and another synagogue baked cakes for us. We came into synagogue that Friday night, and there was a table packed with cakes for the members of the synagogue, not for the Goldberg-Poland family, because they knew how much work we as a congregation put into saving Hirsch and saving the hostages. And when I was on the train to come here now, I got a text message from my synagogue saying, another synagogue on our street has lost a loved one, Rabbi Avi Goldberg, who passed away in Lebanon last week, a beautiful person living on the building next door to us. And now my synagogue, after receiving cakes from the Klausner synagogue, is baking cakes for the Biocha synagogue because we know that communities are hit. And this is only the cakes. You will hear from my friends later, from Yonatan, from Lina, from Alex, from Shira, and from Yaela, about the everyday realities. And when I use the word crisis maybe 20 times in the 5 minutes since I came to the podium, it's for a reason. And when I say crisis is an opportunity, it's very, very hard to grasp the feeling of opportunity. We are more embedded in the feeling of crisis as a catalyst than in the feeling of crisis as an opportunity. And when I was planning to talk tonight, Yohan said, talk about hope. Share your hope. Hope is too far to reach right now. I'm sorry if I'm being bleak or difficult. But in the situation we are in now, time with friends sustains you, gives you some energy. Holidays or the little you can enjoy together sustains you and gives you a feeling of, that you can carry on another day. But hope is a really, really big word for me right now. And what I'm finding is that action, response, determination is taking the place of hope. When I feel like my action, my response, my determination, my ability to go every Saturday night for close to 2 years now, we have not had a Saturday night to ourselves. You don't go to the movies, you don't go to concerts, you protest. It has become a second job for us. And it fills the gap, or it takes the place of what hope can come and be later. Action now takes the place for me. Hopefully, we can rest in sometime in the future and replace action a little less and hope a little more to feel the circumstances that we're responding. The New Israel Fund was founded 45 years ago by progressive people internationally who felt that Israel can live up to the values and the vision of its founders and to the ideas that are included in our Declaration of Independence and are not being implemented or don't guide our leadership's everyday decisions and policies. And for 45 years, we've helped grow and support Israeli progressive, pro-democratic civil society. We ask ourselves, what is the role of progressive civil society? And what is the role of progressive, pro-democratic civil society during a time of crisis? Sometimes the crisis is a war where we've lost loved ones and friends. I didn't have the translation at the beginning when you were talking, but I think you were talking about the immense loss of life in our region, where I mourn people who I knew and loved, my neighbors, children of my neighbors. But I can't even start to understand the scale of over 40,000 people killed in Gaza. And in light of that, you ask yourself, what is the role of pro-democratic civil society in such challenging times? And we've learned that our role, when I mentioned the small crises that we had last year and in the past 3 to 4 or 5 years, that all look, small in comparison to October 7th and what we've had ever since. What we've learned is that we normally have a set of responsibilities as a pro-democratic foundation that sought out in 1979 to establish Israeli civil society and continues to stand beside the important, game-changing activists and organizations. We've learned that we have similar roles that come to play when there's a pandemic, when there is a political or legislative crisis, and when there is a security crisis. And they all sort of boil down to, first and foremost, and my friends in the panel soon will give real live examples of our commitment to supporting the most vulnerable people and communities in Israel. People who don't have access to decision-making, people who don't have access to running water, people who don't have access to health services. We will be there in ongoing work and in times of crisis to support the organizations that offer that kind of help to the most vulnerable communities in Israel. Because in times of crisis, and when crisis is the accelerator, it accelerates social gaps. It accelerates your ability to access resources or inability to access resources. So our first commitment in a time of crisis will always be Israel's most vulnerable, or the most vulnerable community under Israel's ruling. The second thing that we're always committed to during times of crisis, and we have learned about ourselves in those past and existing times of crisis, is that we continue to commit to building a strong pro-democracy camp. Because we are now at a time where activists and organizations have to be concerned about their ability to operate. And freedom of speech, freedom of protest, what a teacher can write on their Twitter or Facebook page can bring them to be arrested, especially if they're Palestinian Israelis. And then they'll go to the police station and have to take a picture with the Israeli flag because you want to really make sure that they're really humiliated, even if you have to set them free after a few hours or a day or more. So protecting civil and human rights under the fog of war, under the fog of the pandemic, it's very easy for our government to close the courts because it's dangerous during COVID to be in the court. So the first thing you close happens to be the courts. And it's very easy for our government, especially with our current Minister of Interior Defense, national defense, they call it now, to find those teachers who wrote something in Arabic, and if it's in Arabic, it has to be words of terror, right? And that's where we're at a time of crisis. We're there to protect the basic civil liberties. We're there to protect the most vulnerable communities, the civil, human rights, the liberties of our ability to operate as a democratic society. And we're there to do three more things. Something we don't want to do any of this, right? But something we really don't want to do is to step in for the government. And I think, Kristen, you just mentioned it. Post-October 7th, pro-democratic Israeli civil society, especially the New Israel Fund as a flexible, quick funder. We're always there to give the first grant. We're not always there to give the biggest grant, but we're always there to give you the first grant, and we're always willing to take a risk with the support that we offer civil society organizations. So we had to buy hotel rooms. We didn't even use our grants process to approve that. We didn't even go to our board. We had our finance person pick up the phone and say, hello, this is Ronan from the New Israel Fund. I'd like to buy 20 hotel rooms for people who've been evacuated from their homes. We had to pay for first aid kits for communities in the unrecognized villages. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we had to buy diapers maybe with our money. This is what we did in the first few weeks because the government of Israel wasn't doing this work. And that was a shock to all citizens, I think, even center-right. The extent of the disappearance of the national services and the stepping up of pro-democratic civil society, which has been prepared because for a year already by that time, they were organized, we were protesting. We had groups and centers and you know, ways to move food and clothes because we were organized, because we were protesting already for a year. We had all those things set in place, just ready for war, you know? So we support the most vulnerable. We support civil and human rights. We step in for the government, which is something we deeply do not believe in doing. We look at the international community to see what we can learn. We are not the only fragile democracy in the Western world. We know you have neighbors who are struggling democracies, who are illiberal democracies. We can learn from that. The New Israel Fund sees a role in bringing knowledge from Hungary, from Poland, from Turkey, from places where social change activists have been dealing with the same processes from the same playbook. It's like sometimes we think our government is using the same script, word for word, copying what Orban has been doing. It's like maybe calling them up and saying, okay, do we now hit on the public broadcasting services first? Or is it civil society activists before that? Just tell us, you know, the right order and the right timing, but to tick all the boxes of what illiberal democracies need to do. So NIF wants to learn too from illiberal democracy, but from the social action in those places. And finally, and I will end with this because it is so important, and at a time of crisis, it looks like luxury to think about whatever you want to call it, the day after, the vision that we want to commit to. It's luxury to talk about vision during war when you're running to a bomb shelter. It's luxury to talk about vision when you're burying your loved ones. It's luxury to talk about vision when your nephews and sons and children have been serving in reserves duty for 300 days and more during the past year. And when other young men and women are sitting in yeshiva and, you know, it's just, I don't want anybody to have to fight or serve. But maybe it's going to be the thing that cracks our government that seems, you know, so strong and can't be hit by anything. Maybe that's the internal disagreement that will break it up. Halavai, I wish it'll break from the right and not from the left. So thinking, planning, investing, taking time and resources to think about vision in the middle of a war, in the middle of a crisis, is the thing I'm probably most proud that NIF is currently heavily, heavily investing in. Because for most Israelis, when you talk to them about what is your vision for peace, what is your vision for the region, they say, there is no partner. Really great line that Israelis love to commit to. I believe in peace, but there is no partner. They say Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, Hamas, what have you, want to kill us. There's no, it's in their religion, it's in their culture. All they want is to take over. Don't talk to me about peace and vision. And on the first month of the war, we were all volunteering in agricultural work. I went to pick avocados on Kibbutz Saad. It's on the Gaza border. They have beautiful avocado groves, and they needed help. And we organized a few friends, and we went to help. So I learned two things. Well, I learned how to pick avocados under constant shell and bomb sounds. You just stop hearing it at a certain point. I learned that when people tell you, and remember that you learned this from the New Israel Fund. When people tell you, go for the low-hanging fruit, does that term exist in German? Yeah, pick the low-hanging fruit. When you're planning something, start with the low-hanging fruit. Does it make sense in German? Yeah? That doesn't make sense in avocados. Because the low-hanging avocados are here. So if you want to pick the low-hanging avocados, you have to crawl. You want to pick the eye-level avocados. And when you're planning to start a project or a process, I learned from the avocados, start with the people who are at eye level with you. So that is a piece of learning that I learned. But most of all, when I told people, I was wearing a New Israel Fund t-shirt. I was doing the avocado picking with a New Israel Fund t-shirt. So people who were volunteering with me that day said, oh, you're from NIF. Everybody loves to hate NIF in Israel. What are you doing now? What kind of response do you have to October 7th? I was proud to share the support that we offered to the wonderful work of social change organizations and activists. I was proud to talk about our support of the evacuee communities. I was proud to talk about our support, freedom of speech to Palestinian Israelis and to everyone. I was proud. But then I said, and we're talking about a future vision. And we're planning something different, and we're talking about something for the region that would bring Israelis and Palestinians back to the negotiation table where we haven't been sitting together for too long a time. And my friends, I don't know them, but they were volunteering together with me, picking avocados that day, laughed at my face. They laughed out loud. Who are you talking to? What kind of vision? What do you think we can have here? And that is when I am recommitting to a different vision for the region. And that is where the New Israel Fund is developing the Israeli response of what Israelis need to do to bring Israel back to the negotiations table. I can't bring Palestinian leaders from Gaza to the negotiations table, but I can show commitment, and I can show guidelines, and I can put my money where my mouth is and say, let's talk to Israelis about peace. And I will end with a few small pieces of data. We have had the privilege of supporting a very interesting research center at Hebrew University, the Accord Center. Accord, led by Professor Iran Halperin, research social psychology and public opinion and the way it should influence how we shape our campaigns, because when we talk to the public, and if you are involved in social action, you know that sometimes something is burning in you and you want to tell everyone, if Israel deports refugees, it's like what happened to the Jewish people during the Holocaust. How can the Jewish people who lived through the Holocaust do the same to African people who are living through a situation like this? And that's how we speak, because it burns within us. And we learned that that's not the way to go. And we learned that when you tell Israelis, and this is from a few years ago, when you tell Israelis, it's a peacekeeping communities, the refugees. They work in the best restaurants and the best hotels, and they are the best staff. They don't see their future in Israel. They're passing through because they're coming from Africa, and this is the geographical way to get to the free world. When you tell them different kinds of data that don't always represent our values, sometimes they resonate with mainstream Israelis, sometimes they resonate with the bigger community, and for the people who are value-driven, they're already with us. So for peace, and for something that is not just a military, ongoing military solution, can't even say military and solution together, but military tools or direction, we are looking at the Accord findings. And we are seeing that together with a growth in hate, racism, mutual fear, and everything that you imagine that is happening within Israeli society, we also see, and I wrote down the statistics, before October 7th, when you asked Jewish Israelis, how important is reaching an end to the conflict, to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict? Is that an important issue for you as citizens of Israel? It wasn't even one of top 5 issues for Israelis before October 7. Nobody cared about reaching an agreement and an end to the conflict. When you ask Israelis today, post-October 7th, how important is it to reach a solution for the conflict? I got the number. Close to 70% of Israelis within a year, I don't think they love Palestinians, probably don't trust Palestinians, probably don't even trust Jews on the left-wing camp, but 70% of Israelis understand that this is a burning issue. We didn't have that. That's an opportunity within a crisis. Close to 70% of Israelis think that a military solution on its own is not a solution, and that you have to have some sort of an internationally led, diplomatic, in-depth peace process. And finally, 70% in a medium or high level see themselves as part of the liberal democratic camp. And that is a small gift that we have to thank Benjamin Netanyahu, Yariv Levin, Bezalel Smotrich, and Itamar Ben-Gvir for. Because when showed the option, 70% of Israelis identify with democracy and feel that it's important to fight for our democracy. So as long as I have strength, and as long as the New Israel Fund has the resources, we will continue to fight for Israeli democracy through our partnership with the beautiful people you are going to hear from now, who will tell you about the different aspects of this everyday, exhausting work. And I want to end by quoting Rachel, who I mentioned when I opened, Rachel Goldberg-Polin. Sadly, many of you know who she is. She would have rather stayed anonymous, but she is the mother of Hirsch. And John and Rachel brought such a beautiful voice to our crazy conversation, sometimes disgusting conversation. And she reminded me of something I learned from my grandfather, who died today, 25 years ago, and is from the Talmud. My grandfather Yosef taught it to me from the Talmud, and Rachel taught it to the world from the Talmud. The Jewish prayer, the Kaddish, which we say many times, but mostly for the mourners, when we mourn a family member and a loved one. The last sentence of the Kaddish is, "He who makes peace in the heavens will make peace upon us. Amen." And when you say these words, when you're reciting the Kaddish, you take 3 steps back when you say these words. When you're in synagogue and you say Kaddish, you say the whole Kaddish, and then you say, "Oseh shalom b'mromav, u'yaseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen." You take 3 steps back, because if you want to make peace with someone, you take 3 steps back. That's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shira. Jonathan Zeigen is our next speaker. Jonathan grew up in Kibbutz Be'eri. He was trained as a social worker and mediator, and he was a peace activist in his early 20s until, as he himself has said, he fell into a political coma. Today, he's living in Tel Aviv with his wife and 3 kids. Jonathan lost his mother on October the 7th, who was a well-known Israeli peace activist. He didn't know it by then. Only 38 days later, he and the relatives and friends of Vivian found out that she was murdered on that day. How this has affected him and his life, we are now going to hear from himself. Please, Jonathan.
Hello. The headline of this evening is 1 year after October 7th, and I think this in itself needs to sink in a bit, that a year has passed, and not only has it passed, it's getting worse. So for me, on October 7th, my mother didn't survive the massacre in Kibbutz Be'eri. And I find it kind of strange that I keep on being invited to speak, because I've been saying pretty much the same thing for over a year now. But I guess reiteration is a part of impact. So I'll say it again. I sat a bit of background on that morning. I was with her on the phone, and we were talking, and we didn't really realize, we didn't comprehend the scope of the event and the fact that our once celebrated army isn't coming. And at some point, I heard very loud gunshots outside of a window, and then it sunk, the realization. And I suggested that we say goodbye. And we did. We managed to say words of love and appreciation. And I'm kind of grateful for that, because most of my friends, and I know too many people who lost either their parents or their kids or their siblings, didn't get that chance to say goodbye. But this helpless feeling afterwards, for me to sit when they came, knocked on my door 38 days later, and told me that her remains were identified, And I thought, what can I do with this helpless feeling? And I felt a very deep sense of responsibility and an urge to utilize my own pain and to become invested in change. Because it was very clear to me that my mother wasn't killed in a car accident. October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. So in my logic, my mother was killed in the context of war, in the context of mutual dehumanization that we have been going through for a very long time. And if we want to stop paying that price, and if we want to stop losing our loved ones, we need the opposite of war. It won't heal me, and it won't help anybody else if other mothers are killed, not in Israel, and not in Gaza, and not in the West Bank. If I want a world, a reality, where people aren't killed, I need to behave differently. So that's what I did. I started kind of a manic phase of activism, of using my voice, speaking to the media, to social media, in the hope to shape discourse, in the hope to reclaim peace. Because there was a reason why I fell into what I call a political coma. It was just irrelevant. I grew up in the 90s, so Oslo was a big thing. And I remember the energy of our leadership, meeting on lawns, shaking hands, signing drafts of agreements. It was hopeful times. And since then, it just deteriorated into this status quo of managing the conflict while expanding the settlement movement. And I bought into it. In my 20s, after my kids started to be born, I have 3 now, I couldn't put my resources into that. And now, as Shira said, crisis breeds opportunity. People stopped being indifferent. For me, it was personal. I went through a very strong before and after effect in my life, and I couldn't go back into maintaining this fantasy of a small bourgeois life while the occupation and the conflict are resuming. So I felt like we needed a new discourse in our societies, and we needed to start telling a new story. So there was that. I also joined hands with a few organizations, the Parent Circle Family Forum, which does a lot of educational work. I speak with youth in Israel, and it's very bleak what our youth is thinking. But it's also very important to meet them and to show them an alternative narrative. And also with OLMEP and NIF, I've been actively doing advocacy work in Berlin. It's my 2nd time. This morning I was in your president's office in a meeting. In the United States, I've been 5 times already since October 7th. Next week in Switzerland. And the reason for that is that the international community has a crucial role in our conflict. They have been actively enabling the status quo up until October 7th and have been actively sponsoring the war since. It's not a question of a concerned bystander. It's a question of accountability. We have a blind spot in Israel. We don't make the link between security and the occupation and the conflict. We think we have a security problem where actually it's a symptom. So we need a signal, a strong signal from the international community to show us the problem that needs fixing. And that can happen only with a synchronized effort, an international alliance that has authority to offer incentives and to inflict sanctions. We can't continue receiving unconditional support, diplomatic support, and economic support, and weapons, to just continue with the status quo. I've also established, together with my family and with the NIF, Shira in particular, the Vivian Silver Impact Award, which will be granted annually to 2 women, Jewish and Palestinian, who are working in the fields of peace building, shared society in Israel, and the promotion of women to leadership positions, because those were the values that my mother, Vivian, led her life by. And more, there's another initiative that I'm starting to work on now. So people ask me often, where do you find hope and strength? And I always think it's the other way around. Where would have I found hope and strength if I didn't have a mission? If I wasn't invested? Because for me, hope is not something I find. It's recognizing the gap between the reality we witness and experience and what can be a reality, and closing that gap. And what is a reality? A reality is one of atrocity, unimaginable. So many people have lost their lives since October 7th and are losing their lives daily. And it's not just crimes against humanity, it's also self-mutilation. What we as Israelis are doing to ourselves. This is the reality we are experiencing. But I believe that is very much realistic to reach an alternative reality, where the realization that Palestinians are not going to disappear, and that we can't and won't kill, we won't kill 7 million Palestinians. And 7 million Jews aren't going to disappear as well. We're not coming back to Germany. And so, what? Yeah, that's true. The hipsters are coming back. So with that realization, it's clear that it's possible to create an alternative reality where we share the land. Because in my mind, it's not that we don't want peace because it's too complicated. It is complicated because we don't want it enough. What we lack is will. The minute we transform our mindsets from two obsolete peoples in a clash to a group of problem solvers, that we need to solve the problem of our two nations sharing one land, with security for Israelis, with liberty, and the right for self-determination for the Palestinians. That is the problem that needs fixing. And it's very plausible, in my mind, the minute you sit to the table. It's a question of technicalities when you have the will. And that's what I'm going to be invested in to foster the prospect of that, and to foster the political imagination that is so lacking in our societies now. What else? I think it's enough.
Is this switched on? Yes, I believe so. Okay, I'm now going to introduce our four panelists. We are going to have 40 minutes of discussion here, and afterwards there's going to be time for questions from the audience. I will ask you to ask in English, if you wish so, if you wish to ask. And Shira and Jonathan will be joining for the question session later, and then after that there will be some final words from the NIF. So on my left side we have Shira Livni. Shira has been working with the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, or short ACRI, since 2021. She's leading the unit for human rights in the occupied territories at ACRI. Before her work with ACRI, she was working with Hamoket, another NGO in Israel, and with J Street in the United States, an NGO with which you might be familiar, where she was organizing campus activities. Shira has a BA in History and Political Science from Tel Aviv University and an MA in Conflict Resolution from Georgetown University. Next to her, and next to me, is Lina Qasem Hassan. She's a doctor and a family medicine specialist, and also the chairperson of the board of directors of the NGO Physicians for Human Rights in Israel. Lina is regularly, or has been regularly, volunteering with the West Bank Mobile Clinic of PHRI. Maybe we will talk about if that's still possible. And she also used to participate in medical delegations to the Gaza Strip. She volunteers with the organization's Department for Prisoners and Detainees and has been accompanying Palestinian hunger strikers. She's originally from Nazareth, right? And is now living in the Galilee, in a village which was recently hit and affected by rocket attacks by Hezbollah. On my right side, we have Yela Ranan Livnat, who is the CEO of an NGO called the Regional Council of Unrecognized Villages in the south of Israel. I think we will talk a bit about what exactly this organization is doing. I think it needs a bit of explanation. She was a parliamentary advisor to Mansour Abbas, a member of Knesset, and she's a lecturer in social studies and economics at Sapir Academic College. Yela is an active member of an NGO called Other Voice, which is an initiative of the residents of the Gaza Strip, together with residents, from the Gaza border region, together with residents of the Gaza Strip, who seek to raise a new voice of hope. Originally, or I don't know if originally, but you are from Kibbutz Kisufim, which means that you yourself had to leave your home after October 7th, and I believe you also have a story to tell about that day. Finally, to my right, we have Sasha Miseritsky, who is the director of the Russian-speaking department at an NGO called Tzedek Centers. Sasha is originally from Ukraine, where he started his way into educational work and social work with and in the Jewish community. In 2013, he immigrated to Israel and has been continuing in his work in educational projects, especially with new immigrants. Sasha has an MA in Immigration and Social Integration from the Rupin Academic Center. Welcome to all of you. I want to start by asking Yela. The Regional Council for Unrecognized Villages is an organization that is doing advocacy work and assisting the inhabitants of several Bedouin villages in the south of Israel, which are several dozen villages which are not recognized by the state, even if they have been existing for decades, and that means they don't get any services from the state. So the council helps the inhabitants with all kinds of services. After October 7th, on and after October 7th, you were like almost on the front lines. These villages are not far away from the Gaza Strip, and they were heavily affected by rocket fire, and they didn't have a good defense system other than other places in Israel. So I wanted to ask, how has October 7th affected your work there in and with the villagers, and how has it changed your organization?
Thank you. No? There you go. Okay. Thank you. The Regional Council for the Unrecognized Bedouin Villages, RCUV for short, is an organization that the leaders of the villages created. In Israel, we have 20% of the Israeli citizens are the Palestinian minority. Of this, we have a minority, which are the Arabs of the Negev of Bedouin descent. So there's about 350,000 Bedouins, Arabs, Muslims in the south of Israel. Israel's policies have tried to concentrate this community into a small area as possible, urbanizing them into these concentration towns, which have been just a big failure. There's a lot of social breakdown, there's a lot of poverty. Half the population has refused to move into these towns and are living in the same place that they had lived before 1948 in their villages. The government, in order to convince them, and again I'm using the word convince in a bit sarcastic way, has not recognized the existence of these villages. So if you look at an Israeli map, they don't exist. When they don't exist, then they don't receive, there's no schools there, there's no no roads, no public transportation. And the worst part is there is no planning, no urban plan for the village, meaning that there is no way that a person can go and receive a building permit. And so all the houses of about 150,000 citizens of Israel are illegal, because there's no legal way to get it. And once they are illegal, that means the government has the obligation to demolish the house. And so all these people live under the threat of house demolitions, of their home being destroyed. So they created, in 1997, the leaders of the villages said, okay, we need to have our own representation, and we'll do it as a organization, since the government does not allow us the regular one, like everybody else in Israel has a local council. So these 100, at the time there were 150,000, we have actually succeeded in creating a recognition for 14 villages. So these people made their umbrella organization, making sure the government could not do divide and rule against them. And they have, every village has a committee. Every committee sends their representative to the RCUV. We have elections every 4 years. And my boss is the elected person of the 100,000 citizens of Israel, Bedouins who live in the unrecognized villages. And what we do is everything needed to bring about their rights, education, health, public transport, stopping home demolitions. What happened, if you look at the Israeli map, it doesn't exist, which means also in the Israeli military map, they don't exist. And when there were rockets coming from Gaza, there we have in Israel like 2 tiers of protection. One is the dome, what's it called? The Iron Dome, which stops the rockets while they're in the air. And the other one is running into a shelter, and they had neither. That is less of a problem because we can use the phones. But people didn't even want, it doesn't really help if you hear the siren, if you've got nothing to do about it. It just causes a lot more fear. And so the chances for a rocket to hit a person in the unrecognized village and kill him was 20,000 times higher than any other citizen of Israel. And there were quite a few people that were killed on that first day. And then again, once more, when Iran attacked us, the only family that somebody was severely injured was from the unrecognized villages. So we have been trying, we had wars before this one. So we've been trying for the last 20 years to promote, to make our government allow the people either to build their own shelters or to bring governmental sponsored shelters. And, but there is just last week, Israel brought about 20. We need about 10,000. So that's what's happening.
And how has the organization itself changed in the last year?
I'm actually happy to say in a good way. October 7th, I was in my own home with my 12-year-old daughter, and Hamas came into our house. And I am alive because, I don't know, we have 2 bomb shelters because it was a small house, 2 small houses we connected together. We have one from one house, one from the other house. We were in the one, we moved from the one to the other during the day because the handle was broken. And I think they just didn't look for a second one. So I'm here today with my daughter's alive too. And a week after, we were taken down the next morning. We were in the house with Hamas in our community for 24 hours. After 24 hours, the army took us out of there and took us directly to the Dead Sea. A week later, I was already with my organization and my colleagues distributing food that New Israel Fund and others paid for, brought money for, because there was no access to any food. And the only organization that actually can reach the houses in the villages that need the food is the organization that belongs to the community, the RCUV. And what I found was that together with this very strong wish to help, like you were talking of, Shira, beforehand, it happened also towards the Bedouin community. And so friends of mine, they found me there in the distribution area, and they said, we want to be here with you too. and people from overseas as well said, we want to help you out. And so we received funds and we received friends, and we are, every day when I go to work, we are Jews and Arabs working together under Arab leadership inside Israel to change the situation. So it, in many ways, I mean, except for the death, I mean, of course, the negative parts of war, as an organization, we have found people in the organization are people that are happy to work together for a better future.
Thank you. Sasha, I'd like to turn to you. We've heard from you, Yela, and also before from Shira about the lack of governmental response. So in the south of the country, this has clear political reasons. Those villages haven't been recognized for a long time. In other parts of the country, people were very surprised that not only the army didn't come on October 7th, but also in the weeks afterwards, there was very little of governmental response and assistance. So the organization you're working for, the Tzedek Centers, is its mission is to strengthen local engagement and communal resilience. And you work in you have a very broad spectrum of activities. After October 7th, one thing that the Tzedek Centers did was to assist evacuees, people who were displaced from the Gaza envelope region, but also from the north of Israel. So can you describe a little bit like this lack of governmental response? So where was the government? And are you the government now?
Hopefully. Erev Tov, good evening everyone, and thank you for having us here. And thank you for choosing to discuss a so important topic as a civil society in Israel. Yesterday you asked us if we see any bright side and any hope in what's going on in Israel these days. So I believe that a strong civil society is only one bright side, is the only one hope for the future of our country. A few words about Tzedek Centers and what we are doing. Already for 8 years, we have been engaging and empowering citizens of Israel and helping them to act and to change the city, the place they live in. And we have a network of around 20 centers over the country. I say around because we were 18 this year, and now we're open a few more. The recipe of Tzedek Center is we open a physical space in a city center. We bring a director to the center that is coming from a community, and we build a partnership with the municipality, with the local NGOs, and bringing people that want to make a change, want to bring an impact, and make for them training courses, support them, and trying to change the environment and city around us. So when last year in October, already on the evening, on the 7th of October, we had 2 Zoom meetings with all our communities and partners. One was about how can we protect partnerships between Arab and Jews in the mixed cities, because what we witnessed in 2021 when all these clashes and conflicts that bring the previous war. So we started to think how we can prevent this. And another meeting was how we can help the citizens that stayed on the south of the country. Because the army wasn't there, the government wasn't there, the municipality wasn't there, and we started to look for a solution, how we as a civil society can help them. So already the next days we had hundreds of volunteers that started to take people on their cars from cities on south, from Sderot, Netivot, Ofakim, and looking for a safe space in the center of the country. And a few days after, we already had meetings in Sderot. It was a completely ghost city, empty. As the government reported, there was no citizens there. Everyone was evacuated. But what we found when we came there is that more than 5,000 elderly Russian-speaking citizens stayed in the city. The municipality even didn't know where are they, who stayed in the city, who was evacuated. The problem with the Russian speakers, they already migrated once, and for them it's very hard to leave their homes. So they choose to stay there. And we started to make a list, going from a house to house, making the list who stayed in the city, and trying to understand what needs they have there, and bring all these lists and problems to the municipality, trying to together with them find a solution. So in a few weeks, we already had a database of thousands of citizens, not only in Sderot, also in Netivot, Ofakim. And together with the municipality, it took I think, few weeks, months, for the government and municipality to try to start do something. And together with them, we started to make calls to the people, bring them food, bring them medicine. And what else we witnessed, that hundreds of volunteers, Russian-speaking volunteers, wanted to act, wanted to take an active part, wanted to help. So, and with a lot of options for people who speak English and Hebrew in a country who could do something, for Russian immigrants, there are no options how they can take more active part in what happened there. And for us, was very important to organize them and help them to help. That's what we did for a few months, going every day to cities there, bringing food, talking to the people, trying to bring help, translating. Most of the ministries even didn't make any effort to translate information to the Russian. Many Russian elderly people, they don't speak Hebrew. Only in the last 2 years, escaping the war in Ukraine and regime in Russia, more than 100,000 people immigrated to Israel with no languages, with no knowing Hebrew. So escaping from one war and coming to another war and being evacuated, I think, third time in 2 years, it's not easy.
You just mentioned it, and I think it's actually important to stress that after, in the 1990s, there was a big wave of immigration from the former Soviet Union into Israel, more than 1 million people. And since the start of the Ukraine war, I think Israel has seen the biggest wave of immigrants since then in such a short time. So the highest numbers of immigrants to Israel are still, like these days, coming from Russia and Ukraine. So I think this makes clear that those people who just recently arrived need like special assistance more than some others who have been in the country for many years. So how is the situation today? Like, could you give back some of the responsibilities into the hands of the government, or are you still taking care of a lot of like services, and how sustainable are the initiatives that you set up in different places?
I think today we are, as a Tzedek Centers, as a platform for social and political activism. We should mostly work with the last wave that came in the past decade from Russia and Ukraine. It is mostly young immigrants that escaped the dictatorship in Russia, that escaped war in Ukraine, and looking for a new home, and looking for these liberal values that they didn't have in Russia, and because of war in Ukraine, they also had this. So I think our responsibility as the Israeli society is is to build these bridges between this new wave of immigration and bring this to make this connection between Israeli society and this group of people. And I believe that this new wave of immigration from Russia and Ukraine can make a real change in Israel if we make an effort and connect them.
All right, thank you. I want to turn to you now, Lina. Until now, we have talked about work with different parts of society in Israel. So the Physicians for Human Rights are also working inside Israel, but they are doing a lot and very important work in the Palestinian territories, in the field of medical care, for example, or as I mentioned when I introduced you, working with Palestinian detainees. So I think especially after October 7th, these are topics which for many people in Israel are quite hard to digest, I think. So how difficult has your work become since October 7th?
Oh, good evening, everyone. Difficult question, but I would like just to give a little background about Physicians for Human Rights. We are an organization established in 1988 after the first Intifada by Dr. Ruchama Martin, which is a psychiatrist that saw what was happening, what was the occupation, what harm it did to the people under occupation, Palestinian people in the occupied territories and in Gaza. So she organized establishing this association, and they were Palestinian and Israeli doctors working together, because she said that doctors can't stand watching what's happening and violating the right for medical care for the different communities under the control of Israel. So that's what is Physicians for Human Rights is advocating and is documenting the violations of human rights and the right to get medical care for all the communities under the control of Israel, including Palestinian in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, and also Palestinian minority inside Israel, and also for people who has no legal status in Israel, immigrants and work immigrants and asylum seekers, and also for prisoners inside the incarceration facilities inside Israel. So we have really a lot of work that we do, and by the years we saw that at first it was only medical delegations giving humanitarian aid and medical aid to in the West Bank and in Gaza, but by the years with the years we realized that humanitarian work is not enough, because what our power will be to change the policies that makes this reality of violation of the right to get medical care. So we advocate this right also on a public level inside Israel, because unfortunately the society of Israel, especially since October 7th, is not exposed to all these violations and the war crimes that have been done by Israel, unfortunately, and not really exposed to the atrocities done in Gaza. So we see our duty to expose the society to these atrocities, and we advocate this also in the international field. We try to affect the decision makers also in the international field in order to seek for ceasefire and to investigate all the crimes that led to this humanitarian disaster in the Gaza Strip. You asked about the change of our work since October 7th. Well, what happened is that the escalation of the conflict and first, we had a mobile clinic that we helped the evacuees of the south. After October 7th, we actually believe that we have to be with the victims from both sides. So that's why we organized this clinic. And also in light of the disappearance of the state, all the state authorities were, as said before, disappeared. So we saw that it's our duty to, as a civil association, to help. On the other hand, we saw that the targeting of the medical system of Gaza by the Israeli forces have led to a complete collapse of the medical services in Gaza. All the medical facilities were attacked directly, and that was used as a war tool in order to, which duplicated the number of the victims and what's happening right now. We see it especially in the north of Gaza, actually, the complete blockade of humanitarian aid, medical supplies, electricity, water, and fuel, which led actually to the hospitals are not functioning. People have no access to any kind of medical care in any level. The medical personnel are being arrested, killed, and being under big trauma since October 7th, and actually not functioning. And right now in the north, Israel is forbidding any international humanitarian delegations to get and give any medical care assistance to the non-functioning medical system there. So we think that our duty is to advocate that, to speak up also inside Israel and in the international field to end this disaster.
As you've said, in Israeli media, mostly there's like a one-sided picture, as in mostly in Palestinian media. So how successful are you in your mission to raise awareness for what's going on in Gaza?
Well, we are not so popular. The agenda we are trying to bring about to let people remove their eye blocking glasses and to see the broader picture. We are trying to do this also inside the medical system in Israel. I am, as a physician, working inside the Israeli medical system. I have been facing, like many of my colleagues, not only in the medical system, but also in the medical system. We are talking about the academia, we are talking about the journalists, or private people that have been, there is a policy of silencing, persecution, and, any kind of showing any empathy or, any kind of protest against the crimes being done in Gaza, and any sympathy with the victims, with the children, with the women that are killed is considered as supporting terrorism, and you can find yourself or arrested or losing your job or fired or something. So people are very much afraid. So we are trying also to advocate this inside the medical system. We are trying to show the medical system that, not to be part of or to see their duty as doctors, which is a humanitarian field. Their human duty to save lives and not to be to take part in this, to be totally enlisted without asking questions about is it ethical to be part of this, especially in the incarcerating facilities. We have talked a lot about State Iman, which is, like people who were arrested from Gaza were put there for months, which is black hole. No one knew anything about them. They were arrested in very bad conditions. Some of them were under torture, and they didn't get any medical care, and we advocated the right to get their medical care, and that was published everywhere. We try, but I said we are not very popular because of the contents we represent.
Thank you. Now, finally, I want to turn to Shira Livni from Akri.
Can I just add something small about the medical system, the medical teams in Israel? We have been witnessing last 2 weeks that more than 270 doctors signed like a letter supporting the letter that Canadian and American doctors who were in Gaza volunteering sent to Joe Biden and to the American regime. So 270 doctors, Israeli doctors, asking for ceasefire and for stopping all the violations of the international law in Gaza. And that was something that is giving some hope somehow.
So, Shira, we heard about the restriction of civic liberties in Israel after October 7th, and the Association for Civil Rights in Israel is one of the, I think, oldest and a very well-established NGO, very important NGO, which is working in Israel, but also in the Palestinian territories, trying to defend rights and liberties of people. You, for example, submit a lot of petitions to the Israeli High Court. The challenges for organizations such as Akri have not only begun on October 7th, but they have been ongoing for a while. The current government was elected into office at the end of 2022. And they started quite quickly to pursue their agenda. So I wanted to ask if you can give us maybe a little bit of the larger picture, like what has been going on since October 7th in the shadow of the war, so to speak.
Okay, I'll try. So thank you for having me. As you said, we had problems before the war. The challenges were there. I think a lot of us heard about what is called or referred to as a judicial reform or the judicial overhaul. It was, let's say, put on hold due to the war, although it was already struggling due to the very much impressive civil protest against it in Israel. But it was put on hold in the first few months of the war, but it didn't really stop. The goal behind this so-called reform is to weaken the judicial system, the courts, but also the other relative branches, in order to allow the government more power. And what the government has learned that they don't necessarily have to pass laws to gain more power. They can limit the selection of judges, right? They can even ignore certain rulings of the court and do take other steps in order to weaken the judicial system, not to mention to constantly attack it, so it will always be on the defense and will always be a bit scared of what will happen if they will push back against the government. Another thing that has started to happen and been accelerated, as the other Shira mentioned, crises are accelerating things, is what we call the takeover or the Ben Gvir takeover over law enforcement. So when the current government took power, Ben-Gvir was appointed to, used to be Interior Defense, but now it's National Security because everything is now national security. And with that appointment, he also got extensive authority over law enforcement, something that we are actually petitioning against. It's ongoing in the court. And the concern was that when political actors are getting involved in law enforcement is no longer about rule of law and equally enforcing the law for the safety of everyone, but it's become a political tool. And what we saw in the last 2 years, and specifically since the war broke out, that indeed police, prison system have become a political tool to oppress specifically the Palestinian community, to silence criticism, to prevent protest, mostly protest against the war, and also to harm prisoners' rights as a sort of act of revenge. Another thing that, again, started before, but since the war broke out, become much more eminent, is the attack on freedom of speech. Because when you have a live democratic society, you have freedom of speech. And you have variety of opinion. Some of them are very hard to listen to from both sides, but they are there, and they are important voices to hear. But for the current government, you don't want criticism, because when the government wants more power, it doesn't want critical voices pushing back. So what we have witnessed is that not only there is infringement on the right to protest, but also on freedom of speech in public spaces, where since the outbreak of the war, a post on social media can get you arrested, even if it's somebody saying, "I heart Gaza," you can be arrested, and your arrest will be public. You will be blindfolded and handcuffed. And then you will be photos, as Shira mentioned again, at the police station with the Israeli flag behind you to humiliate you even further. And it will only happen if you are a Palestinian or a very, very vocal Jewish Israeli on the left, which are the minority. It won't happen if you are an Israeli Jewish calling to kill all Palestinians. It won't, because there are many voices who are doing that. And it's also happening in the academia, where there is no longer a live, free debate in academia, and a critical one, which is crucial for democracy. And I think maybe the biggest win for this government is that they no longer have to push on the academia to infringe on freedom of speech. They are now doing it themselves. And we have professors here who can share how their own activism caused them to lose courses or students and be criticized in their own institutions. And of course, you can't really silence society without also infringement on the arts, right? On saying what is an acceptable expression in the art. So we are seeing our artistic shows and movies who are getting canceled because they are not speaking the right narrative. And I think another thing is crucial to remember within the borders of the 48 borders, but also in the occupied territory, is the armament of civilians. Since the war broke out, there has been an extreme increase in the license to carry arms that has been given to civilians without supervision, and without background checks. For example, do you have history of domestic violence? It's not being done. And also there was an extreme increase in forming what is called civilian guard squad or something like that Ben-Gvir has been pushed to have more and more. Like around 900 were established, but there are no guidelines to what they're supposed to do. and what is their responsibilities in the public sphere. So they are now become some kind of a private militia. And that is the case for both inside the 48 borders and also in the occupied territory. And I think maybe the biggest project that is happening in the shadow of the war, I can talk on many other things, but I will end with saying that the biggest project is something that was one of the main goals of this government from the beginning, and that is the annexation of the West Bank. That was the first guideline in this current government. Is stating the Jewish people rights over all the land of Israel, including the West Bank. They, of course, call it Judea and Samaria. And what we are seeing is that now, through bureaucratical means, they are changing the structure of governance, the military governance in the West Bank, specifically in Area C, in order to move all the responsibility into civilian political hands. So we are no longer in a reality of a military occupation. We can argue about the occupation and its problem, but it's still a legal structure that is acceptable according to international law. We are now in a situation when Israel is putting the responsibility to govern Area C in civilian hands in order to gain Israeli sovereignty and Jewish supremacy over this area.
Thank you for this very optimistic description of current realities. I want to open up the discussion a little bit. Any of you, do you have something to add from the perspective of your work, of your field? Maybe Yela?
He told me we're going to have a second round, so I kept this for the second round. So,
but a quick one.
It's going to be quick. So I was speaking about the unrecognized villages, and you asked me about what happened since the war, but it didn't happen since the war. It started beforehand. This right-wing, the home demolitions have been going on for scores of years. But we are now into a new phase, with Ben-Gvir being the Minister of National Security. He now has taken into his hands a process of demolishing entire villages. So it's not a house here and a house there. It's thousands of houses. But now, over the last 3 months, 3 villages have been destroyed. You came to see one of them. That's where we met first. So it's not a house, it's just erasing a village. And next week is going to be the 4th village. And over the next year or so, we're expecting another 10 villages to be totally erased from these villages that have been there since before 1948. And so we're talking about at least 10,000 people who will have to, we don't know what's going to happen to them. And at the same time, Israel is creating Jewish communities, sometimes on the ruins of the village, and if not, then in the area. So there's 14 villages to be erased, and there's 14 Jewish communities to be erected within the same area. And so it's happening, you know, what the war has done is it's made our issue not important, because we're also killing 40,000 people in Gaza at the same time. So what is another village or two while Israel's creating such horrors in a different place? But for the people whose villages are going to be destroyed and are being destroyed and have been destroyed, it is a life being destroyed. So what's important for me and you inviting me here is that I can talk about it, because under so much noise, this is so silent. And so I want to thank also the New Israel Fund for all the time supporting us and knowing that this is important, and giving us the strength to do as much as we can to bring this out. And to do what we don't know yet, how to stop Ben-Gvir from demolishing, from destroying villages. We're thinking of all sorts of things, but our hands are tied. If he can do what he's doing in Gaza, who are we to say what he's going to do in the Negev? So yeah, thank you.
Sasha, do you have one sentence? I think what is going on last year that in Israel is shaping a new identity. And what Shira told before about mashber and giving birth for something new, what we witness and what the speaker said about what we witness now about national security, Ben Gvir, and all this policy, what we are talking about now, we almost don't see it in a media in Israel, and I think is in the right wing is bringing very easy solutions and very easy options what they do, and they put a lot of money and effort to shape this new identity in a society. So I think it's our responsibility to act and be more active now and be more united. And I think it's what gives us hope for change in the nearest future.
I would like also to highlight what Shira said before about what's going on in the West Bank, because all the light right now is in Gaza. Sometimes we forget the disasters going on the West Bank. We in Physicians for Human Rights have been visiting the West Bank for so many years, once a week in a mobile clinic and giving medical aids, Jewish and Arab doctors together. But since October 7th, we have duplicated this. We are going twice a week because of the needs that we saw on the ground. What's happening there is that the settler violence is just reaching like a scale that we didn't see before on the ground. Before, the army was there to control, the checkpoints and the borders and the movement of people. But right now on the ground, the settlers are doing this, because now the settlers are the army. Like you can't distinguish if he is a settler or a soldier. So and we see it on the ground when we are talking to people. That like villages near Nablus or Jenin, they don't have access to go to the cities. They are in the village. If there is a medical emergency, they can't reach. Sometimes it takes like 20 minutes to reach Nablus to go to a hospital in the city. And in the situation on the ground, it takes like 5 hours through the mountains so that they can't be attacked by settlers. We have also a project that we did with another organization called Yesh Din, that we with the shepherds community that was expelled in October 12. They were just a group of settlers attacked them. They are Bedouins that are living, with their animals and everything, and they were attacked, and they took their children and just ran away to another area. And we visit them usually to give them medical care, and we talk to them about this horrible. They just live in an open space near Ramallah, and they really don't have any access to medical care or schools or anything. And you can imagine that this is happening to several communities in the West Bank, and how that affects their health and their mental health. The children there are traumatized. They're afraid to leave because the men are, guarding the place, but and the women don't go out anywhere, and the children are in horror all the time. So you can imagine what's happening to their mental health. And so this is important, really. The settler violence is a disaster that everyone have to know about it, and to work to change it on the ground. And the sanctions that were taken by the United States of several people it had to be expanded more.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I think what I want to add is that how can we see the shared theme, if you will, that is manifesting itself in different, let's say, levels of volumes in different areas. And that is the change in the use of force or the use of state violence by Israel. And we see it, of course, most extremely in Gaza, where Israel basically abandoned any kind of adherence to international law and the law of war, and destroyed most, if not all, of Gaza, not to mention killed so many people and injured many more. And we see it in the West Bank, in also state violence towards Palestinians and Palestinian communities in Area C, where 20 communities since October 7 have been forcibly transferred, and the backing of settler violence, and as Lena mentioned, the basically collaboration of the military and the settlers, and many times the recruitment of settlers to be the military force in the West Bank, not to mention arming many, many settlers, including ones who are known as violent settlers. And within Israel itself, the willingness of police to use extreme means and violent means to disperse protests in ways that we haven't seen before. Not to mention the way that the violence the state used against the Palestinian minority within Israel. So all of those different levels, if you will, shared the common theme, and that is the change within Israel in the willingness to use state violence in order to achieve whatever agenda the government is putting itself. And I think it's important not only for us as Israeli society to fight and push back against it in order to remain a democracy and heal what we can, but I think it's also crucial for the international community to take notice, and to also take notice of the liberties that Israel is taking that are precedents and can be very dangerous for other countries who will look at Israel and say, hey, if they can do it, so can you. Because if Israel is allowed to prevent the Red Cross for visiting prisoners in prisons, and if Israel is allowed to ignore the International Court of Justice rulings, then maybe everybody is allowed. And then there is a very big question on what is that we are trying to achieve as an international community who is accountable to each other. Though I think we need to look at the situation as something that we shouldn't separate. We should obviously put most of our attention on what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon and the West Bank, but we also need to take notice that there are shared themes and there are shared threats and dangers, not only to Israel, but to the international community as well, in terms of accepting the behavior of the current government.
Thank you all. We've already talked for longer than we were supposed to, but I think it was important to hear about all these issues. I would like now to invite you to ask questions, and at the same time, Shira, maybe you sit over there so that we have less confusion with Shiraz and Jonathan. So if you have a question, please wait until you're given the microphone, and then please ask your question in English so that everybody here can understand it. In the second row, please.
My name is Juan Andrés Bernhardt. I'm a son of refugees who went from Germany to Uruguay to South America. I have no personal connections to Israel, but I'm touched by what is happening. I wanted to ask you, in the news now, we are hearing that the Israeli parliament has, how do you say, prohibited the United Nations Palestinian help. If you can tell us something about what you think about that.
Mm-hmm. We will take another question right afterward, on the right side, in the third row, please.
Yes, I have a question for Yaela or Yaela. Can you say something about Other Voice? I've never heard about it.
let's take one more question. Maybe you have a question? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Leila Al-Zubaydi. I work for the Heinrich-Böll Foundation. I don't want to distract from what is happening in Israel, and it's actually good to hear from you actually coming from there, because here we speak a lot about Israel and Palestine, but rarely with the people who are actually affected. Maybe you know that after tomorrow the German parliament will pass a resolution on anti-Semitism, and it will be very difficult to support organizations that support any kind of boycott of Israel. And I just wonder what you think about that for collaborations with Israeli civil society, Palestinian civil society. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your questions. I think the matter of like German policy towards Israel and Jewish life in Germany is a big and important topic. But maybe we should like first and foremost give our speakers the opportunity to answer the questions that they know about from their work in Israel. So who wants to say something about UNRWA?
I am? Okay. All right. So what happened is there were several different bill proposals, but the one that passed is a bill that basically allow Israel to cut all ties with UNRWA, right? It's firstly going to reflect on the operation of UNRWA in East Jerusalem, but they are more limited there. And in previous discussions on this bill proposal, it was promised that the state will find a solution. It's remained to be seen, because East Jerusalem is a known fact that the state is making a lot of promises but doesn't really deliver, and kind of having those residents to kind of stay in the shadows. But the more worrisome effect is twofold. First is for the activities of UNRWA in the West Bank, in the refugees camp, and even more worrisome is for the activities in UNRWA in the Gaza Strip, where the UNRWA network, right, and facilities are one of the main lifelines in terms of humanitarian aid into Gaza. So there is a big question about what's going to happen, specifically if UNRWA will be able to get the funds that it's getting from other donor states, because a lot of those funds are oftentimes transferred through Israeli banks because of the financial system in the West Bank and in Gaza. There is also a question about will UNRWA workers will be allowed to enter through Israel. I would say that we don't know yet what will happen exactly and what will be the ramifications of this bill, because there is currently, and I'm hoping it will continue, a lot of pushback from international community to kind of, fine, you passed a bill, but can you please not implement it? I would say that the result of the current elections in the US probably going to play a role in how this is going to be impacted. Sorry? In everything, yes. It really is in everything. So the answer is there is the threat, and it's a very worrisome one, because you can have whatever criticism you want about UNRWA, but their role on the ground is indisputable, and there is no replacement at the moment. And Israel is not even trying to pretend that they will do something to replace. But it remains to be seen how much Israel will be willing to enforce the law and to actually bring to the collapse of the humanitarian system in Gaza completely, and also to a lot of the educational humanitarian effort in the West Bank.
Yela, you want to say something about Other Voice?
Other Voice was created, it's people living on the Israeli Jewish people living on the Gaza border. And we created this organization many years ago when Israel was saying, we are bombing Gaza in order to protect you. And so we said, please don't do it. But we were a very small voice then and today. So that's why we call ourselves Other Voice, in the sense that this other voice from the border is, no, we want something else happening. For me, over the years, it's been, living on the border and having ongoing shelling and wars, and standing out with a voice that tells Israel, don't fight back, we don't want wars. Start a different process. It's a small minority, and so for us to have each other, it was very, very meaningful. Among other things, we made sure that we had friends from across the border, so people from Gaza who were also peace-seeking, and us. We had a few conferences when we still could do that, when the Gaza people were allowed into Israel. What happened sometimes is after they went back to Gaza, they were incarcerated by Hamas, so we stopped doing things like that. Now that the war is on, then they turned to us as much as they could to ask for the money needed to pay people from Egypt to let them into Egypt. So for us, it's our friends, and so we tried to help as much as we could, also financially, and we did help some family members of our friends. So it's an ongoing, we still exist, and we still work as much as we can. Most of the people now have been, the government has told everybody to go back home, except for very few communities. I'm one of the communities that has not got back home, will be in a year or two. But it's important for us to do what we're doing, so that we have an ability to say, and it's also what you said and what your mother also belonged to other voice. So this is why we exist, and this is what we do.
I want to thank the audience for the very precise and short questions that you asked. Shall we try another round? Who has another question? Okay.
My name is Amos Ritter. I would like to ask the members of the panel if you have experienced any personal threats due to your activism, and if you so, how does it affect you?
And Amir Tayaba in the first row.
Thank you all for being here and sharing your activism with us. I wanted to ask you, Sasha, specifically if you can elaborate just a little bit on the potential that you see with these 200 to 300,000 Russian-speaking immigrants who came to Israel during the last couple of years en masse, but also since 2014 there's been a rising trickle from Ukraine, and what they bring with them to Israel, these new immigrants that Israel can benefit from. And I've heard the word sanctions uttered a couple of times, and perhaps, I mean, we all know that some sanctions have been imposed on settler organizations, on certain individuals. Perhaps you could elaborate, those of you who mentioned the word, perhaps you could elaborate a little bit upon what that would look like and how that would be effective in today's international world as well, where, you know, this affects different realms that interact.
Another question? No? Then I think the first question was about personal threats. Anybody who volunteers?
Yeah, you want to go? Okay. I lost most of my job because of it. I teach at Sapir College. And I have always, like through other voice, but also my work with the Bedouin and right-wing organizations like Regavim, Im Tirtzu, they don't like what I do because they're right-wing and I'm not. And so they have done campaigns against me. The last one was about a week after I escaped from Hamas. The campaign was done through a student. Let's fire Dr. Yaela because she's a Hamas supporter. And what is this campaign? I mean, I just told the student, "Okay, I'm going to take you to court for defamation." Is that what you call it? And she said, "God, I'm so sorry," and she withdrew it. But you know, it's in the internet. And so while I was trying to teach during the war, while I was in the Dead Sea, while I didn't have internet and all those things, my bosses said, you know, your students aren't happy with what they say about you on the internet, so you can't teach any more Jewish students. So from almost a full course load, I now am allowed to teach one class in English who are Bedouin. And it's, you know, beyond the fact that it's economic, okay, so I don't have an income like I did before. It also is extremely, you know, just knowing that the place that you work is just taking away your job because this is what's going on the internet. In the past, I've had other things. This first war of Gaza, this is many years ago, I was willing to talk against the war. Nowadays, lots of people are talking against the war. But at that time, very few people talked against the war. And so I spoke on Israeli TV saying, the war is not the right way to go. Horrible statement, right? And so then there was a campaign against me. There was a whole bunch of stuff done. Like, for example, they put a car in my name on the ads. And so I'm getting this phone after phone after phone of, do you want to sell your car? And at the time, my son was a soldier in the Gaza war. And so being a mother of a soldier, being willing to speak out, being bombed, and also this whole thing going on. So yeah, they've got lots of ways in which to harm people who are willing to speak up for peace and for justice.
Okay, I have many things to say, but I will try to, because you know, I'm also an activist and I'm a Palestinian, so it's easy to be a victim to this kind of personal price. I work in a Jewish community as a family doctor, and in Kiryat Bialik, it's in the north of Haifa. It's also under the rockets right now. On February, I was interviewed in Channel 12 by a journalist who I thought he's okay, so I accepted. You know, it's the first time, 4 months after the war in Gaza, the Israeli media, in the first time, remember that they have to interview someone to talk about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So I said, okay, it's an opportunity to represent that, and I went to the interview and I talked about, you know, the destruction of the medical system, the deliberate attack and the systematic attack, and how that affected actually the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And turned out that 3 of my patients wrote a letter to my employer, to the Clalit Institute, a medical institute in Israel, and they demanded to remove me from this clinic because I'm a Hamas supporter, like Yaela. When I was the first people to go to help, you know, to quote unquote, to condemn the Hamas attack and in public, and to go and help the evacuees of Kibbutz Be'eri. And these are my opinions. I grew up on humanistic values, and that I don't change every year, yeah. So these people just you know. Try to make like a protest in the neighborhood where I work and say that we don't want this Hamas supporter doctor treating us, and that was very difficult to see. You know, people that I treated, that I cared for really empathically for, in spite of the difference in the political views, yeah, point of view. I do my work as a doctor, really without difference. Even I have soldiers that I treat. I have mothers of soldiers that are in anxiety right now, that I'm giving their all the empathic care that they need, because this is my job and I'm doing it professionally. So it was very painful to see these claims about me. I have also an experience with teaching. I also teach doctors, young doctors who are specializing in family medicine in Haifa. And I teach with Amos, Dr. Amos, my dear colleague, medical ethics for so many years. And this year I decided to challenge the student. We decided to challenge the student to bring the issue of medical ethics in the detainee camp State Iman, because there were doctors that were facing these medical dilemmas, and they shared it anonymously. One doctor shared it anonymously in Haaretz. He sent a letter, and he said about his dilemmas, and some of the students complained about us that we are trying to force our political agenda, and it's not acceptable that we talk about treating these terrorists and giving their rights and giving them medical care. And so the manager of the program talked to us that it's not okay to talk about these explosive issues with the students in these sensitive days that we are living, and that that's what we talked about, academic freedom. So it's very challenging right now to talk about ethics in Israel in general, and in the medical ethics in particular. So the standards are like double standards, no red lines. That's what it feels. And I decided that I can't continue teaching medical ethics in these under threat. So I resigned right now from this. But it's also painful to see that happening.
Thank you. Shira, you wanted something?
Yes. So thank you for the question. I will start by saying that we've heard from beautiful people. Other beautiful people have been, the work of other beautiful people has been mentioned. And no one in our conversation today, and probably in the Israeli pro-democracy camp, was as beautiful as Vivian. And in the personal attacks, the question of the personal attacks, I think the most painful is the attacks that we can see against Vivian after her death. And I learned from Yonatan to ignore. And if you can ignore it, I can try to ignore it. It's the most devastating thing to read. I'm telling you, there was no beautiful woman who did beautiful things as she was. And it is the ugliest thing in the Israeli social media and public sphere when anybody says even half of a dirty word about her, and they say more than that. So I'm learning and I'm exercising, just ignoring those voices in order to survive. If you can do it, I can try to do it. The New Israel Fund has enjoyed like 12, 14 years of public attacks in Israel. And we were the canary in the coal mine of delegitimizing pro-democracy, shared society work. We've gotten used to that, although you never get used to the slander and the protest under your office door and having to get a new guard and a new protection system and double protection system to your cyber space in the organization. So for us, it has been a reality for over a decade. Since 2009, 2010, it's our everyday reality. In the last holiday of Pesach, Passover, we had an internal, deep internal debate among our staff and board of the New Israel Fund, whether or not to launch humanitarian campaign to aid organizations in Gaza. We are the New Israel Fund. We don't operate outside the Green Line. But we understood that there is no Jewish Israeli organization who is responding to hunger and lack of medical services in an organized way in Gaza. And we decided to raise money, not for the New Israel Fund budget, but a new campaign over and above our regular fundraising. We said, if you want to support NIF to do this beautiful work, you can do that. But if you want to give to Gaza, to feed people in Gaza, to make sure that people in Gaza have medicine, that families, that if you think there are innocent people in Gaza, and for Israelis to even think that there are innocent people in Gaza, it's a big leap, then we will provide the way to offer support. And it was a very difficult internal conversation for us. Our board was very, very scared to take this move because of 14 years of public attack. And it has a chilling effect when you get used to everything that you do. You get such criticism from Israelis, and you get, you know, your ability to work become narrow and narrow and narrower. And it does have a chilling effect. Those lawsuits and those slander campaigns, they scare us, or they limit us. We try to rise above them. And around Pesach, when we decided to do the campaign with World Central Kitchen, and the person we were in conversation with was killed by the Israeli Defense Forces by mistake. The representative from World Central Kitchen, who we were in conversation with, how can we donate for food and medicine in Gaza? And I am lucky to have a leadership role at the New Israel Fund, and to be in a position to say to our board and to our staff, as a Jew, as an Orthodox woman, as a human being, as an Israeli, I need to know that we're supporting all the right things in Israel, but that we're also extending a hand to hungry people on the other side of the border. And we were so scared it would limit our ability to ever operate again in Israel. It would probably, we said it would be the last decision that we make, because they're never going to allow us to exist if we give money for food for Gazans, because we're so used to being attacked. And we decided to do it, and nothing happened. No, they try to stop the trucks all the time, but nothing happened to the New Israel Fund. It was a sobering moment to understand that we have to stay strong and stand for our values, even if it's the scariest thing to do. And we were so scared to make that decision, and we were so scared to raise that money, and we were so scared to transfer that money, and we are so proud. And it had zero cost on our public appearance and ability to operate. So when you do the right thing, sometimes you get to survive and do it more and more. And I think you heard from everyone today, scary things and concerning things, and a terrible reality with de facto annexation and with infringement on human rights all the time, but also unbelievable work. And as I said before, I don't know about hope, but action. And that is just a huge privilege to be involved in.
Do you want to say a quick word about the Russian population?
We are running out of time, so
we are running out of time.
I'll give a few brief facts. The people that keep coming out to Israel, they have no way back home. They already lost one home, and they want to build a new one, a different one, different from a dictatorship in Russia, in a country that destroyed by war in Ukraine. They shared liberal values, and in research that we did with the Accord Center a few months ago, we see that more than 70% of them see themselves as Israelis, and they want to stay in a country.
How much was 70%? They're not going to believe us.
75, 73, it's easy to say 70%, and only 40% believe that they can make a change. So now it's our role to give them this power, this instruments to make a change in a new home. And On a few more facts, more than 80% see themselves as Jews. And if we ask our Rabbanut, I think less than 30%, according to Rabbanut, are Jews. So they want to see a different country with the liberal values, the country they can marry in, the country with the public transportation in Shabbat, because most of them can't afford a car. And again, we see now a lot of efforts and money Putin and right-wing camp to work with them, because unfortunately the mistake that we did again and again with every new wave of Aliyah, of immigration, is we start to think about them a week before election. It's not the right way to engage them and not the right way to work with them. And unfortunately, right-wing did their homework and they did a great job right now.
All right. Thank you all again. And I think there will be a few short concluding remarks from Maya Soirev, the Executive Director of the New Israel Fund in Germany.
And don't worry, I will be very brief, I promise. I want to touch upon three things. First of all, thank you to all of you who came here this evening and who are following us on the live stream. We don't take it for granted, and we appreciate your interest and your concern. Secondly, thank you to everyone who made this happen, to the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung. You have been a great partner to us for many years, but especially in this past year, which has been a very difficult one. And we appreciate the trust and the cooperation. We also don't take this for granted. So thank you to Emil Scholz, to the MENA team, especially Bente, Bauke, Lina, and everyone else. Thank you to all the staff who have been here translating and taking care of the technology and making sure we can watch the live stream. Thank you to all of the NIF staff and board members who made this happen, especially Jon Böhme, our co-chair, who's worked so hard on this. And it wouldn't have been possible without him. And thank you to our panelists. Really, I can't thank you enough because you are an inspiration to all of us. You have been throughout the past year, and I appreciate it's not an easy task to come here and talk also about personal stories, about activism, about keeping it up under all of the challenges. So really, I can't thank you enough, and I wish that we can do more to make your voices heard, because this brings me to my second point. In Germany, we talk a lot, as has been said, about Israel and Palestine, and we don't hear the voices of Israelis and Palestinians enough. I hope we can change this. We also talk about solidarity with Israel a lot. What does that actually mean? For me and for NIF in Germany and around the world, it means supporting these people who are doing this kind of work and who are making sure which brings me to my third point, namely, please follow us, support us, come to our events, share our events. Please donate if you can. It might seem like a small thing, but it's really not. And we appreciate all of you coming here. Thank you very much. Oh, I forgot to thank Christian Meyer, our chair. Thank you so much for coming as well and moderating the event.